Welcome to this webinar on technical debt management. My name is Werner Heijstek and I'm a principal consultant at the Software Improvement Group. Technical debt is a complex challenge for most of the large organizations in the world. And at SIG, we have helped many of these companies getting technical debt under control. It's a very big topic, and that's why we've decided to break up this webinar into a series of 3. This first webinar will specifically address the relation between technical debt and your contracts. If you have any questions during the webinar, please make use of the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We have reserved some time towards the end of the webinar to explicitly address your questions. And now I'd like to introduce you to my colleague Joep Mertens, who is a sales manager at the Software Improvement Group.
Yeah, thanks so much, Werner. So I think it's good to start off by saying that the first of the 3 webinars really diving into why this is an economic topic, not just an IT topic. Because in the end, it's all about the business case, right? Just talking about good software is not cutting it anymore. At the end of this webinar series, we hope to give you the insights on how to flip that discussion to the economics of it. To give that a bit more background, I'd like to start off by a metaphor, as it speaks to the imagination, I think, of almost everyone. So imagine a house which almost sounds too good to be true. It has a pool, is huge, a large kitchen with enough space for the whole family to have breakfast, a basket court, well, you name it. The downside, however, of that house, it was constructed quite poorly. So the construction was not poorly made by intent, but because the timelines have been shifting continuously and the scope of what needed to be done was broadened all the time. So what you thought to be the villa of your dreams is actually not that great anymore. And the construction team has to keep patching all kinds of quickly built features that the owners have been asking for. Now, one of the big issues we see in that metaphor is that those developers have a very hard time showing that the expectations don't actually match the reality. Could you make me a window that is curved and please do it by the end of the week? Could you build me an annex and never mind the foundation? We'll look into that later. Well, you catch my drift. This, let's say, continuous pressure to just deliver new features to the house is causing quick choices that lead to a sizable amount of technical debt over time. And when I say sizable over time, this is because not everything is always as obvious as that annex or that curved window. For instance, it could also be the glue of the sink that just doesn't seal everything, which causes the wood to slowly rot in the kitchen cabinets because the water is trickling down. All these small defects amount to a house that just requires really high maintenance. And as a bonus, all those poorly constructed pieces affect each other as well. Some of them are just hidden after a while, so you don't really know where to look. So after 15 years or so, the whole house is squeaking and creaking and almost waiting to collapse. And after that time, the majority of the development team is actually working day and night just to keep the lights on. Because the small defects keep popping up and they have a hard time convincing business that they need more time just to do the maintenance. So eventually the whole topic just gets left out because they cannot make it transparent. Recognize this? I think you all do. But why is then the majority of our industry just looking at that fancy window or that annex? And the metaphor I just used. You could use it as, let's say, the functional side of it. Well, we see that it's mainly a case of just continuous pressure on IT. Continuous pressure to deliver more functionality and an ever sliding inside of the construction quality. Not only for IT, but also for business. Because development is moving more towards the business at this moment in time, with programs like SAFE as well, the grip on technical debt is just sliding even further. For example, also in low-code systems, we see that bad decisions are made quite quickly, and more FTE is just needed to keep the boat afloat. So when you thought you were digitizing and creating an ever smarter landscape, with a nice and clean architecture. In fact, you're just creating a budget killer, which looks more like this. And believe me, these examples are not exaggerated. We've seen these on a daily basis, and more than once a customer thought it would look more like the top right corner you see right now. Well, luckily, you don't have to invest all your time in fixing these items. Instead, the key is focusing on those items that have the highest impact on the overall technical debt. We see that this is a case of making technical debt an investment opportunity and treating it as such. In doing that, we see two main challenges. Firstly, you have to identify what technical debt has the highest return on investment, as you can't and you shouldn't repay everything. And that's just not possible. Secondly, try to create a way that makes it visible, not just for development, but also for management. Open up that discussion. And you want to open up the discussion based on facts instead of opinions, and create understanding and transparency throughout the company for what you're dealing with on a daily basis.
So what does technical debt really look like? How does it relate to your budget? Let's look at the lifespan of a system. As you're building a new system, these systems started at some point that you currently have. There are two ways of going about it. One way is explicitly trying to avoid as much technical debt as possible. This will not lead to a situation when there's no technical debt, but you'll try to limit it as much as you can. What you see is that you have to spend an increasing amount of time to making changes to that software system. Now, if you don't explicitly steer on the accrual of technical debt in a software system, what you see is that technical debt begets more technical debt. So it's something that reinforces itself as you need to avoid all the shortcuts that you have taken in the past. You see that you are building more shortcuts, in fact. Now, what does it look like today? If you look at the period of a sprint, 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever is relevant within your organization, you see that the amount of development effort that's required in a sprint consists of two parts. First of all, there's a required minimal development effort that you just need to spend to do things in a software system. But on top of that, there's what we call interest on technical debt. That means all the extra work you need to do to get your normal tasks done. This is the actual cost that you face on the ground when it comes to dealing with technical debt. Now, this is typically not in your IT budget. This is the anti-pattern of saying, I thought I asked for something simple. Why does it cost so much time? So this is the underlying explanation of what's going on there. Now, two main takeaways here. First of all, if you want to remove the technical debt, you have to spend development effort, and the end result is not functionality, right? So normally business invests in development, and development returns functionality. That's not the case for technical debt removal. So that means development work is done, but no new functionality is delivered. This explains why there's always very limited and sometimes no budget at all to actually address technical debt. It's a very hard sell. You have to pay me for development hours, but I'm not going to deliver you functionality at the end. What technical debt does return is a higher future pace of development. So it means that you invest time, and what you get for that in the future, when you do something to that system, you can deliver things faster. That includes functionality. An important point to make about technical debt is its sheer volume. There's a reason why this is an important topic that many people are discussing. It's a topic that's high on agendas in organizations because of its sheer volume. Let's look at this landscape here. This is a relatively small landscape, 4 applications. There might be hundreds in larger organizations. Each of these applications has a degree of technical debt. There's no software system in the world that has no technical debt, and most software systems have a quite substantial amount. If you add up all these instances of technical debt, what you get is the volume of multiple of your systems. So a key takeaway here is that most technical debt, you should just keep it where it is. There's way too much technical debt to actually address.
Yeah, perhaps we can take a small step back here, because why are you listening to people from SRG on this topic, right? Well, we saw over 9,000 systems, and we created the world's largest benchmark on software quality in the past 20 years. 20 years in which we saw good and bad practices on how to tackle landscapes with a lot of technical debt. We've been doing so on basis of models that we let's say had tested and validated, focusing yet again on facts over opinions. Not that strange actually, as you see that SIG originated from the University of Amsterdam, and we actually still have quite strong ties with the academic world. Now with that, we are uniquely geared towards shedding light on these issues. But let's get back to the challenge of today. Werner, how is this an investment decision?
Yeah, you mentioned two issues at the beginning of the webinar. Let's use those to explain. So let's get back to our landscape here, our tiny landscape, and zoom in on one system. Let's just look at this system one here. What does this technical debt really consist of? Now, if we look a little bit closer, what we see is that it's nothing more than a list of improvement possibilities, things you can do to make working in the system easier, to make it a better system. Now, each of these improvement possibilities has a cost and a benefit. The cost, so what you need to pay, is the amount of effort that you need to spend, development effort, to actually do the improvement that we're talking about. The benefit that you're getting is increased development productivity in the future. So the next time you make a change to this system. It's very important to understand that the vast majority of these improvement possibilities are decidedly unattractive. That means that for almost all improvement possibilities in your landscape in any system, you have to spend more time in getting the technical debt gone, in refactoring it, in improving it, however you want to phrase it, than that you actually get in terms of the return in making speed increases in it. So the business case is negative. That means that there's a small amount, these percentages are just illustrative, it's always small, small amount of improvement possibilities that have an interesting business case, a return on investment that might be attractive. You spend a little bit of effort and you get a big productivity increase. Of course, the problem here is that it's a very high amount of technical debt, so it's very hard to find these improvement possibilities that are attractive. Now let's step back for a second. We've prepared a poll question here. I'm very curious, to what degree do you use quantitative measures to approach the cost and benefit side of technical debt in your landscape? So I hope you now see a multiple choice option. So do you do that? Don't you do that? Or do you try to do it from time to time? Can you see answers already, Joep? That's on your end, right?
Yeah, it's coming in. Yeah, so that's not really a big surprise, obviously, for us, but the majority, unfortunately, does not do this. Yeah, I think that's mainly a reason that the capabilities are not there, but a 94% score of no.
No, okay, well, it's higher than I thought, but it's still, yeah, that sounds recognizable in the sense that this is often not something that's done consciously. So oftentimes this budget exists, maybe not even explicitly, and it's not managed in a way that you could manage an investment. That really relates also to the second challenge that you talked about earlier, which is that the improvements, these investment decisions, as we phrase technical debt opportunities, are by default de facto delegated to developers. So if a developer has time left, a couple of hours, and decides, okay, I can pick something up, maybe do a little bit of refactoring to make future development easier, she will pick, knowing that application very well, the best possible place in that location. Let's make that assumption. So let's use the analogy of a mountain, right? So the highest vantage point that you have as a developer, extremely knowledgeable about that particular application, is what has to be improved in that application. And so this is a very common pattern. I also think the results of the poll that we just discussed reflects that. This is the status quo mostly. If you would ask a similar question to somebody managing multiple applications, either a developer working on more applications or somebody owning a portfolio or is in charge of a domain, so a larger collection of applications, that person might say, this limited time is better spent on this other application. You're right, for your applications, this is the optimum, but in my set of applications, I see better places for that very limited budget that I have. Of course, if you continue this pattern, the logical outcome is that what you should do is, in considering how to allocate that limited technical debt budget, you should look at your entire landscape. There's nothing you should leave out. Everything should be involved as a potential interesting source of return on investment when it comes to that budget. Let's do another poll question here. So to what extent is so which part of your organization, and there it comes, who's primarily responsible, is the question, for the refactoring decisions at your organization? Is this also delegated to individual developers, or do you in fact try to decide on this in a more inclusive manner where more people are involved, maybe even team leads or management?
I'm quite curious to see the answers on this one, actually.
Yes. I'll give you a little bit of time.
I think it depends a lot on who you ask it, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of management will say that they are in charge, but eventually.
Okay.
Yeah, so that I wouldn't say a surprise, but yeah, maybe a surprise, and then it shows us a bit on who is in the call, because the answers are quite scattered. But what we saw now is a 48%, so there was, well, let's say a bigger majority for development, actually.
For development, okay, yeah. So we do see that pattern. I would be interested in the other ones, what other products are using at different time. But yeah, so this pattern of by default just delegating this to development because, yeah, it's not an explicit decision is, so okay, that's recognizable. All right. Okay, we've been talking about problems and issues. We want to spend a little bit of time also discussing solution. As said earlier, this is a webinar with multiple parts. There will be 2 more. We'll be discussing the solution in a bit more detail, but we at least want to leave you with a high-level solution of how you could address this problem, how we in fact address this problem in practice. 4 steps. Let's start at the top. So what you essentially first need to do is you need to index all your technical debt. So any technology you have, any system in your organization should be part of this equation. Legacy, modern applications, middleware, ERP systems, it does not matter. All of these things should be, all of it is software, and all of it should and can be measured in the exact same way, using the exact same approach. So then you have a complete overview, and of course it should be automated, because else this is a very time-consuming exercise. You should automatically be able to index this for your entire landscape. Second step, the analysis that we just discussed, which is the cost-benefit analysis, the return on investment of all of these individual improvement points should be listed. And you don't want to see them. You only want to see the attractive ones, right? You want to see a subset that are likely to give you an outsized return on investment. Now, we're not at the point yet that you can then press the button and it starts refactoring these specific candidates. That doesn't exist yet. We wish, and we're working hard towards it, but that doesn't exist yet. There's still a step involved. There are still 2 manual steps involved. The first one is you need to align these with your strategy. So let's say there's a very interesting refactoring candidate that takes little effort and gives you a good return in terms of productivity, but it's in an application you want to sell, or it's in an application that you want to phase out for whatever reason. Yeah, so these are simple, and there are many more reasons. These could be good reasons to actually not to not select that specific candidate. Last one, development still done by hand. So developers need to be able to pick up the refactoring, but instead of giving them lots of sort of findings and things that are wrong with a piece of code, you need to help them. So what you need to be able to provide the developer is clear guidance on what the most effective way is to pick up that refactoring. So you need a supportive environment for that, and not a sort of violation-based environment. Now that the developer is done making change to that system, you have hundreds of systems, so people are also making changes in the other parts of the landscape. You need to be able to, at any point, automatically reassess the new state of technical debt in your landscape and automatically assess what the most interesting candidates are to pick up after that. So this must be completely automated.
Yeah, and making it fun, right? I mean, I think there's no developer that really, let's say, wants to work continuously on the backlog, and especially not on something that doesn't really have impact. So Making it fun also for development to work on something that actually has impact. So, but yeah, let's recap this. I think we have some clear takeaways in picking up the challenges we discussed, and I hope those were clear to everyone. Well, firstly, I think it's good to take away from this first webinar that it is possible to prioritize technical debt if you have the correct mechanism and you treat it as such. Then, secondly, I think it's good to start thinking about a manner to, well, let's say, flatten that mountain, create a central vantage point for everyone. So you need a way you can speak the same language at all time, from, let's say, the CEO towards the Java developer, and leave the pure tech out, please. I mean, that's I think something that we should agree upon, because making really techy doesn't really help this, because you want to have a sort of a similar language for everyone. With that, you can actually flatten that mountain and open up a discussion which is meaningful for everyone, both people that have the budget and people actually doing the work. In the following webinars, we will dive a bit deeper into the practicalities on how to do that on a daily basis. One sneak peek: we have developed a platform based on the models we made over time to exactly handle this. So prioritize the technical debt and really make it pragmatic. The platform called Sigrid, yeah, as I said, it's really geared toward tackling technical debt in a pragmatic way and a economically optimal way. Werner, shall we take a look at the questions that came in during the webinar? Let's have a look. Yeah, I think this is one we see quite often. How would you treat a system that runs okay, but has a lot of technical debt? Is that taken into account? Well, I think that's something to do with the touch rate, I think.
Yeah, so yeah, that probably has to do with the degree to which you actually change that system in the future. Yeah, so when you calculate these return on investments, let's say you have one that very little effort to change it, outsized potential productivity increase, but then you know that you change it once a year or at some other frequency that's very low. You discount it, of course, right? So that's done automatically. That's part of this business case calculation. So this is not an interesting candidate then.
Yeah.
Right. So it really depends on the touch rate also. That's clearly also a variable in there.
Yeah, I can see that, right? I mean, there's a lot of systems that just run perfectly, right? You don't have to take that maybe into account for these kind of decisions. Yeah. Let's have a look. So, is this purely a code thing, or can we also look at configurations like this?
Yeah, common question. Yeah, so
it's more the out-of-the-box questions, right, Werner?
Yeah, I would say two answers. So one is so configuration is also code, right? So you can, for many environments, it's a definition matter. So you see lots of code that counts as configuration. So we can look at that. Also low code, no code, visual languages. All of that can be looked at in the exact same way. So that's one answer. The second answer is, oftentimes when people talk about the configuration, standard solutions with a little bit of change, of course, we measure code a lot for many organizations around the world. Almost always these large systems contain a very large custom-built component. It's not always obvious to everybody, so people are sometimes surprised that you find this. But for custom functionality or integration with the rest of the landscape, or for whatever reason, you often find that these package solutions are typically very customized.
Yeah, I don't know who asked this question, but I would almost ask, let's say, because we get this question more often, I would almost ask the question back to you as well. Have you ever encountered a system that you buy out of the box that it was specifically tailored to your company? I think you can already answer that question by no, because you have to not only configure that, eventually you will make some tailor-made changes on top of it. But thanks for the question. So one I think more critical question, at least that's how I interpreted it. Looking at technical debt afterwards isn't really efficient. How do you tackle this at the correct moment? So I think you mean that you have to shift it towards, let's say, when the code is really made. At least that's how I get that question.
Yeah, so this webinar is really about managing existing technical debt, right? So you inherit the landscape in some way, and you have to deal with what's there, and that's very tough. If you're building a new application, if you're building new systems, that you're uniquely positioned to prevent, which of course is the best technical debt is no technical debt, to prevent it. This requires really focusing on how you build it. Funnily enough, that's cheaper because you have to write less code. It's about discipline, really steering suppliers on it or steering your own teams on it. And then you can prevent much of this. It's a bit of an anti-pattern also that organizations talk about their legacy and their modern systems. And then if you really look at these modern systems, you see much of the mistakes, many of these sort of anti-patterns in that legacy landscape, also again in that modern landscape. So it's very important that you actively steer on prevention for technical debt. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, perhaps additionally, I might add, and you see Sigrid in front of you. Just, I think a little over a month ago, we had SRG commit, and we were able to showcase that we're gonna have our CI integration actually live from the 1st of Feb. So we're quite happy with that. That taps into, I think, directly that question, because we're closing that loop, let's say, on direct feedback towards the development team. That will be compatible, let's say, Azure DevOps, Jenkins, GitHub, GitLab, have you. So yeah, thank you for that question. Let's wrap it up. Don't want to steal too much of your time. I would like to thank you all for joining this webinar. If you want to link with me or with Werner, contact details. I think, Werner, if you tap one more, you can see them on the screen actually. A brochure will be sent to you exactly on this topic and how to address it as well to your mail. And that will be done afterwards. And as said, this was the first of 3, so I hope you liked it. Yet again, next time we will be diving into the practicalities of tackling technical debt. So we'll be diving more into how you do that day by day. And I hope to see you there. Thank you so much.